Hey guys, Jono here. I've really had a massive burden to share this message on Gnosticism, uh, dealing with this direct question as to has God uh, abandoned us? Has He neglected us? Does He hate us? Um, the lines in a movie Fight Club, where one of the characters says to another, he says, "Our fathers were our models for God. Our fathers bailed on us." What does that say about God? In all probable estimations, God hates you. Um, F redemption, F damnation. We don't need Him. We are the neglected children of God. Now that to me hit hard because I'd been told before that the whole of the mass media acts as an extension of the Gnostic faith, and I'd thought about that and thought it was interesting that through different avenues we're getting like the other side of the story. Like obviously we know that the world's familiar with Christian narrative and that there's the God, the devil, the wickedness, God love, sends His only Son, all these things, but we don't realize that we encounter the other side of that belief, like the other side of the story, on a daily basis because much of world religion and world media has engaged with the other side, which is described as inverted hermeneutic, like where you would read and accept the Bible, except you read it from an opposite point of view, where you interpret everything the other way, like God is the devil and the devil is God. Now, one thing that I think some people would find puzzling, that with the National Geographic, they recently put out a documentary and it was covering the Gospel of Judas, and they were saying that that was potentially the most reliable gospel. Oh yeah, now the Gospel of Judas is a Gnostic gospel, and Gnostic spelled Gnostic. The Gnostic gospel is, and the Gnostic Gospels are really inverting that. They make God out to be the evil one that has trapped humanity, and that the serpent that spoke to Adam and Eve was actually Sophia, who was the greater God, that was actually the creator of the God of this world, the God that the Christians or the Jews served, and this serpent was really the liberator of mankind, the savior. Yeah, so like it's an opposite way to look at things, which would be why that you, and like for the National Geographic to do that, I think is like that's kind of shocking. But then you just have to start to think that lots of this stuff is just it's dealing with dark theories, dark ideas, and you just have to see whether they're true or not. Because if it is true that God does hate, neglect us, then we need to probably embark on that campaign against God and to outlet that angst and that emotion that we feel and find some method of salvation away from this God. But if that's false, then we're in big trouble, and the implications for us are massive. Like, okay, so have a look if you were just getting ready in your house, and just before you went out to school or to work, and you had some big task you had to do. You had to do a speech. It was a big deal for you as a student, or you had to do apply for your promotion, or you sit in an interview, something really important, and then just before you went out, your father said you were stupid and you looked real ugly, and that you'd probably never amount to anything. Okay, now how would you honestly? How would you feel now about approaching the day's tasks? Okay, now if you're suggesting that God has feelings of hatred or neglect towards you, then like that's your father times 10, because like humanity is wise enough to like trace the source of its existence back to um, some being or some force that like we have derived our life from, because we realize that life, like, we have come from somewhere, and our heart beats, and these mechanisms are they seem to be somehow provided to us. And so what we're saying is that back to the very source of my existence, this being or this force hates me and doesn't want anything to do with me, and thinks that I'm stupid and ugly and wants to control me. Um, like, what kind of effects is that going to have on humanity? And so that's why I think that like a lot of the things that we're engaging with like stem from this feeling of emptiness, because that is really the belief that we're being taught. Because not only has this come through media, like, and what I think is the most shocking point is that this has actually come through the church. Gnosticism, um, largely a lot of it has come through the church. Like, just a little bit on the theory, just so you can understand. The Gnostics, like, if you read the literature, which I don't necessarily recommend or anything, the Matrix got its theories directly from it. The Matrix based its basics of philosophy off Blade Runner by Ridley Scott, and Ridley Scott got all of his ideas from Philip K. Dick's to his book, actually, which was called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" And it was a Gnostic book, and was admittedly a Gnostic. He said that, like, it was about basically pre-programmed minds that God had created, pre-programmed people's minds, and then, inserted thoughts and everything. So we had illusions of love and friendship, but actually we needed to escape them. The only way to escape them was through entering out of this physical realm into a spirit realm, and through death. So it was just really destructive beliefs, right? But the theory was that the original theory of Gnosticism was that there was this ultimate depth, and the ultimate depth had 20 emanations, and one of them was Sophia. Like, Sophia was one of the great gods that came from the ultimate depth, the unknowable entity God that, was beyond comprehension. And Sophia had asked one day to see the ultimate depth, and she ran to the ultimate depth, and she found that she thought she found him, but it was actually the image of the great God. And when she realized that she'd been tricked, then she, in her rage, had this like miscarriage and created this ignorant being called the demiurge. Also, that means architect. And then the architect was unfamiliar and ignorant of Sophia's like existence and the ultimate depth and everything that had come before him. And out of his ignorance, he created the physical world and humans, and trapped them in their material state, like in physical bodies, and with the ignorance of who they really are and who the greater God is, and tricked them into thinking that he was the great God. And then that was believed that was the Jewish God, and the Christian God was that demiurge. Okay, so yeah, I mean, people should find that startling. Now, many people that are Gnostics, like, some of them don't believe that this actually happened in the real world, but it's an analogy for something that is a reality. And others, like, would believe that somehow these events did transpire. And so then the whole plan of salvation and everything became changed, like, and just to show you that these things are prevalent, like, the devil became the good guy ultimately, because he was he was like a part of the savior of humanity. And like, and when you come down to some films that have been put out, like Daredevil, I thought was the most shocking, because straight away, like, if you're starting to think, you should think, well, Daredevil, that sounds like the devil. And Daredevil was out chasing trying to overthrow Bullseye that had been sent from Kingpin, that was come to basically wreak havoc upon humanity, and just bloodshed and attacking that woman that he loved, Elektra or whatever. And what happened was that in the end, Daredevil said, like, he would keep saying that he's not the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. And then Bullseye, his arch enemy, got his hand stuck, and then a sniper shot him through the hands, and then he put both his hands out with 2 holes in his hands, and then like actually wingspan like that, and then he got kicked out of the window by Daredevil. So who is Bullseye then? Bullseye would be Jesus with 2 holes in his hands, getting crucified, and they just retold the story from the Gnostic dark side point of view, where Jesus was not really like the savior of humanity, and not really the good guy. So, it's just really horrible stuff. And obviously, and a major part of the Gnostic theory as well, that Jesus was sent, and that he was actually working towards the greater purpose, which was to overthrow the God of this world, like in the Matrix, they represent it that way, where Neo gets shot, dies, resurrects, realizes that he has the power over death. Um, he's named Neo. Neo means new. Ander means man, son. Neo Anderson, the new son of man. All the biblical imagery, he boards the Nebuchadnezzar. They get on board a ship called the Gnosos. It just keeps going. He's the one. And at the start, one of the characters says, "You're my own personal Jesus Christ." They're saying all these things, and in it, when he gets on the phone just before he hangs up and ascends into the heavens after his death, resurrection, and then his ability to have power over death and stop bullets. Then when he says on the phone, he's speaking to the architect, the creator of the world, and he says, "When I hang up this phone, I'm going to tell them about a world without you, what you don't want them to hear, a world without you, without rules, without laws, and the rest is up to them, without rules and without laws." The idea that, that's straight from Alistair Crowley, that kind of doctrine that no law should exist. There should only be one commandment, is do what thou wilt. That is the whole of the law. Alistair Crowley, by the way, was the father of pop culture. Back in, he started his writings around 1905, based in San Francisco after being banished from France. And people need to know who that guy is, by the way. He's been a major promoter of the Gnostic kind of doctrine and that whole interpretation. So, nonetheless, now I get down to a really important point, because it's not just about the media, it's about the theological, religious perspectives that are prevalent right now. People need to know that Christianity has been infiltrated by Gnosticism. It is not what we're seeing today is not what Jesus taught, and it's not what the Bible actually teaches. And now let me just break down a couple of points on that. Valentinus was a guy that he was going to be knighted as the bishop from Rome, and he got exiled before that. But nonetheless, he spread his doctrines, and he was a Gnostic. He was exiled for his Gnostic beliefs, and he was teaching these things basically through Rome. But nonetheless, they still ended up having their foothold. And when you think about it logically, if God burns people in hell forever, tortures them for their 75 years of sin and rebellion, and then he tortures them for eons of time, and just unrelenting agony, screaming out in pain, and then the devil, he's caused wars and suffering through this world, but yet he has not been responsible for that level of torture. Which one is the worst? Well, then people logically would say God is the worst. And that would make sense. And because they were able to firstly base their doctrine off an impersonal view of God, and so their first attack was really to take Jesus, because Jesus was the major revelation of God to humanity. And so if they could destroy Jesus as being God's son, then people would see no relationship between Jesus and the Father, and he would be mainly appeasing God's wrath, and he would be a created being towards God, or a self-existent God within himself, and it would have no connection to the Father, who is the source of all life. And then humanity would then have no real appreciation for the Father, and feel that God really does love humanity, because they don't realize that God gave his only son. That was, and that's why 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, the epistles, they're said to be an attack against, a prevention against Gnosticism. They say that whosoever denies the Father, whosoever denies the Son denies the Father also. He is Antichrist that denies the Son. So it was that idea there. But I've got 15 minutes for this YouTube video, I believe, and so my major point there is that they have been teaching us that God doesn't love us. We've had that drummed down us through religion and through the media, but it may not be true, and that's all I'm saying right now. It may not be true. Especially if we've been forced into believing it, and we've been tricked into thinking it without actually having to process it ourselves. So I just want you to think about that and question the beliefs that you do hold.